morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Madmouth, on a beautiful Wednesday night in Florida, along with Steve Balestrieri. Steve, glad to have you back.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
That's great. Well, before we talk about the subject at hand, I want you to introduce yourself to everybody again. Well, obviously, you have a new audience every week. Let them know what you stand for, what you represent, and then you get to do it again later.
Well, my name's Steve Balestrieri. I'm a columnist for PatsFans.com, covering the NFL and the New England Patriots. I also cover world and covering events on the military side of the house for SoftRep.com. I also do a podcast for football called Patriots 4th and 2 and SoftRep Radio, where I interview some really interesting people on the military and government side of the house.
Very good. Well, you know what? We got a very interesting theme tonight, Steve. And before we talk about some NFL news, we're going to talk about some moments where wishing I had a camera, and I'll bet you probably empathize there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ramble off about 10 people, and you can ramble off whatever you got. And, of course, when they go to our SouthFloridaTribune.com website, I'll have more than that. But this will just be a good appetizer as well. So, Steve, why don't you give me a basic overview of the list that you have of people where you wish you had a camera? Because I remember what got me going with this whole thing was the Doc Emmerich photo shot that you...
Well, you know, it was funny when you and I were talking about this offline. That was the exact first thing that came into my mind. I wish I had my camera that day because I've always been a huge fan of Doc Emmerich. And I didn't have it that day. And, you know, you don't think about it at the time. But it turns out that was the only time I ever actually got to sit down and talk with him and meet him. And I wish I had a camera.
And meanwhile, we have a theme because of that Doc Emmerich, even though that night I quickly moved and sent you that text message of Doc and I. So with that said, we already got Doc Emmerich. So why don't you come up with a few more names, Mr. Balestrieri?
Well, I'll tell you, as I told you offline as well, I used to do some security work for the film industry when they'd go overseas and film. And, you know, I did a spy movie in Israel with Helen Mirren and Jessica Chastain. And I didn't want to be too much of a fanboy and get my picture taken with them, but now I regret it.
Do you really? Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had my camera that day.
All right. Well, you want to ramble off a few more?
Actually, on that same trip, I met and spoke with the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Netanyahu.
No kidding, really?
He's a very, very nice man. He speaks perfect English. And, he came to the movie set because we were filming in Tel Aviv, and he was cool. He came up, and I met his entourage as they were coming in because he has obviously a lot of security. And so, I introduced myself to the security guys, the advanced guys, and let them know who I was. So they were like, okay, we're good. And so I said, yeah, because I didn't want anyone to get nervous. So I walk up to the boss and want to shake his hand, and they were laughing. They were like, no, he loves that. Yeah, he loves talking with people. But, you know, I got to shoot the breeze with him for a couple of minutes. And then the Prime Minister looked at me and he grinned. And he said, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm a big fan of Helen Mirren. I want to go meet her.
Wow, that's interesting.
And I was like, come on, let's walk back there. I'll bring you back there. So that's what we did. And I thought that was really cool because, you know, at the same time, you know, they get a little starstruck too. Even famous people do.
I can imagine. I can only imagine. Any other ones that stand out?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple other, again, I told you I did a war film in Morocco with Matt Damon, and I got a couple of pictures for that. But, you know, I spent like a whole afternoon because we were supposed to be filming a scene in Iraq at an air base. Well, it was pouring rain. I mean, like pouring rain for like 3 or 4 days. So, because in the fall, like in beginning of November, in Morocco, they actually get quite a bit of rain. And we got more than their normal amount, so we couldn't film like a, Iraqi war scene with, pouring rain and everything's, under mud. So we sat around for like 3 or 4 days. Of course, we were on the clock, and the movie studio wasn't too happy. But Greg Kinnear, who was in his trailer, he could hear all the security guys. We were under a tent in front of his trailer, sitting on a Humvee, and we were telling stories and joking around. And he came out, and he was like, "There's no internet, there's no television, and I'm sitting in there all by myself, and you guys are out here having fun. So why am I in there all alone?" So I get out of the seat, and I let him sit there, and we spent the whole afternoon. He told some of the funniest stories, and he's a really great guy. And again, I wish I had my camera.
Yeah. If I didn't get my hair buzz clipped last Saturday, okay, I probably would have pulled it out when I thought about this subject, and we came up with it a few weeks ago. But the John Deere / clippers got to my hair last week, so there's no hair to pull out, but at least it was a good broadcast to talk about it. So what other ones stand out to you?
The first time I was in the press box in Gillette Stadium.
Okay.
When you first get up there, you're new, you don't want to do the wrong thing, you don't want to say or be in the wrong place. And I kept looking over my shoulder, like expecting any minute now somebody say, "You're not supposed to be up here. Get the hell out of here," So I was like, man, I can't believe I'm up in the press box. And then Mike Reese, who works for ESPN and covers the Patriots, Mike's one of the nicest people in the business. Mike knew exactly what I was thinking. He was like, "Steve, no one's going to tell you have to leave. Just relax and have fun."
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Because at the same time, like, I should have taken a selfie up in the press box. I mean, first time, it was a little exciting. And then right after that, Bill Belichick came up and did his press conference. And, the first time is always, I think, the kind of neatest because it's all new and, you're doing something for the very first time that you hadn't done before. So, I always regretted that. And another time, I always had my camera on me down there. And the one day I had it in my back pocket, I was talking with one of the players. I had my voice recorder doing an interview, and somebody bumped into my back, and I looked over my shoulder, and it was Tom Brady. He's like, "Oh, sorry, dude."
Really? Wow.
He was pulling off his shoulder pads, getting ready to go be interviewed, and he bumped into me while he was pulling it over his head. And at that time, I wish I had a camera again because, I think the look on my face probably was because when I turned around and he said that, and I think the look on my face because he smiled, and I said, "Oh, you're okay, Tom."
Unreal.
And a bunch of stuff in the military. Some of the military stuff I did. There was a lot of times I wish, nowadays a lot of the guys have those cameras they mount on their helmets, and you see a lot of that.
Really?
That's where a lot of the combat video stuff comes from.
Okay.
And I wish we had that. Well, the technology was there back then, but we weren't allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a different era, and there was so many times in so many different places I wish I had a camera. And I did take it parachuting once, but my pictures didn't come out too well.
Okay.
But again, like some of the jumps that I did. Now, one of my friends had a video camera inside the aircraft when I had a bunch of our foreign allies that were going to jump for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm here to tell you, man, it looks like one of those parody videos of these guys trying to throw themselves out of the airplane. And when I saw it after the fact, because I mean, when you're doing it and you're trying to get these guys out safely when parachute for the first time, you're really too busy to realize how ridiculous some of them look until, you look back at the video, and that was a classic.
Interesting stuff. Any more you want to talk about?
There was a couple of times I was when I was in South Africa. We were doing the game preserve Kruger National Park. It's really big. It takes you a couple of days to drive through there, and they have little fenced-in areas where you can stay at night, and in relative safety there. And so this one day, we pulled up, and we could see some lions in the distance. So we're all looking out the window, and the one guy had the window down. And as he's got his camera out, he was taking pictures, and I was just taking it all in. The lions were maybe 50 to 100 feet away, which is pretty close. He was getting some nice pictures, and then the guy in the front seat said, "Hey, look over your shoulder." I turned around. The window was down on my side because it was really hot, and a lion literally walked right by the window, like 12 inches from my nose.
No kidding. Really?
And I guarantee you, if somebody had that on video, you would have laughed, because you'd never seen anyone, the old hand crank windows, not the electric ones. You'd never seen anyone roll that window up that fast in your life.
No kidding. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, South Africa was a really neat place.
Yeah, well, like you said, you've told me that you have traveled quite a bit, that's for sure. So
I'm not done yet. There's still some places I'd like to go, but we're right now holding at 43 countries.
43 countries? Yeah. I've been in all 50 states, for God's sakes, and but I've never traveled overseas.
Yeah, I've just about everywhere in Latin America I've been. Bunch of places in Africa, and some in the Middle East, and one or two in Europe. It was. When I was a bit younger, I traveled quite a bit. So, well, obviously in the military you travel. So
yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, that's the one thing I haven't done is the foreign travel. I mean, I've been. Don't get me wrong. I've been in Mexico a lot, and of course Canada and throughout the Caribbean, but never taken the big plunge around the big pond.
I love Mexico. Yeah.
I mean, I went to Acapulco, went to Cancun. Of course, I can tell you, border towns have been around that you really wouldn't want to go ahead and talk about. Juarez isn't nothing to write home about. Tijuana, had time with my sister with the chiclets. I don't think so, but whatever. You get the drill. Nogales, is another one that was interesting, and I'm trying to think of the other one. Where you can go ahead and get a lot of prescriptions. That'll be for another day. For all you FDA, don't even bother me. You don't know my email address, but you used to buy prescriptions pretty good over in Mexico. It's called Los Algodones, actually.
Yeah. And one of the other things that when I became an officer, my parents, and when I became an officer in special forces and military, my parents came down to see me, get pinned for the first time and become an officer. And, we never didn't think of it at the time, but, we assumed everyone was taking pictures and nobody had a camera that day.
Yeah.
And I wish I had a picture that day. So, that. So, yeah. But, there was, I can think hundreds of times, when you're overseas someplace and you see something and that, you're not used to seeing. And, when I was in Colombia, I wanted to see Pablo Escobar's hippos, but never did see those.
No. Well, you talk about the lions. That got within 10 feet, but no, we wouldn't be talking about the Detroit Lions. They wouldn't hurt anybody. Well, and that's a little segue to later on, by the way. Well, let's get that old Lions reference in so I can get everybody roaring about what we got in store for us. What other ones do you want to mention?
Let's see. I was on my Harley once, and I was stopped at a red light, and like 2 car lengths in front of me. There was a car in front of me, and then there was another guy on a Harley in front of him. And I wish I had a video camera that day, because a semi-truck ran a red light and then was trying to slam on his brakes, and he kind of fishtailed.
Yeah.
And he ran right over the Harley rider 2 car lengths in front of me, and I took my kickstand down. I jumped off there. I was thinking this guy's going to be, roadkill all over the place. And he only had a couple of scratches. And turns out he was a former pro football player. He was a nose guard in the NFL for like 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, he didn't play a very long time, but he made it to the pros. And he was like, I wasn't thinking I was going to survive that one. And the semi ran right over. All he had was some scratches. And I was like, dude, to see it happen in front of you was absolutely amazing. And then see the guy come out of it, just a couple of scratches that you get more trying to trim a rose bush in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting stuff, my friend. Of course, like you say, you're well-rounded and you're well-traveled, so I can imagine. I'm glad that you're able to share a lot of that with the audience. So let me go over a few of mine, and then, of course, a lot of the ones I'm going to also put on there will be on my story on the SouthFloridaTribune.com website. That'll probably be up there tomorrow night. But let me go over a few. Al Kaline of the Tigers is one I wish I had done, but the reason why I didn't do that one over at Lakeland is I was afraid the Tigers PR staff would get wind of it and I'd get kicked out, so I had to be careful, because you don't want to go ahead and get thrown out by the PR guy. PR people, especially when you have to draw that line for professionalism and it stayed on your credential that you can't take those photos.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't. But Al Kaline will be on one. John Wooden out in UCLA Poly Pavilion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I actually do have a recording of him, and I did an interview with him. So, but John Wooden was one that I would love to have had a photo with. But thankfully, I know my tape recorder and the tape is out there. I'll have to replay it. Don Shula, I worked with the Dolphins for a couple of years back in the day, and there were times later on down the road I could have done it, but didn't have the camera there. And again, you had to be careful. And part of the problem with Shula was he had this one guy by him all the time, some kid that would almost seem like a little pseudo bodyguard, so you couldn't really get near the guy very much either.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd always see this one guy on the sidelines with him. I don't know who he was, but never got that one. Wish I did. Another one a lot of people might be all too familiar with is Steve Yzerman of the Red Wings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great hockey player.
Yeah, he was. We had spoken a few times, but again, you got to be really careful about what you're doing when you're in the media around PR guys. So you have to just kind of know, are you a fan or are you working?
Right. Yeah, because if you get a picture of the guy you're doing an interview with, that's okay.
Right.
But if you get in a picture, they frown on that, don't they?
Oh, yeah. I know.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I mean, that's, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I've taken close-up pictures of a lot of really, well-known football players, but, I'm not in any of them because I'm behind the camera, not in front of it. So,
well, in that sense, if I'm interviewing, my wife Candy was so smart, she went ahead and took it of me interviewing these people. Whereas if you do a shot with a person, you got to do it when nobody's looking at you. So, so that you ever heard of that 11th commandment? Thou shalt not get caught. Okay. Well, the 12th is thou shalt not overpay either, but Moses never came up with those back in the day when he came up with the first 10. I just had to amend those things a little bit. That's all. So we'll have a little.
Well, it was funny because I remember when the Patriots got Stephon Gilmore a couple of years ago. He's a very, very soft-spoken guy.
Right.
Unlike most cornerbacks, he's very soft-spoken, but he's very polite. He's a nice guy. So after practice one day, there was about 5 or 6 of us. We were around Stephon, and he was answering everyone's questions. And like I said, you almost kind of have to lean forward when he talks because he's very, very soft-spoken.
Right.
So and when I got home, one of my buddies, he does a radio show called Locked On Patriots, part of the full press coverage, guys who cover all 32 teams. He was like, did you get any good pictures of Gilmore? And I was like, actually, I got one with you holding your microphone right in front of him. So I sent it to him. And then he was like, the only good one I got, you're on the other side of him, and I got a picture of you. So wow. I do have a picture with me and Stephon Gilmore.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, again, you know what? We both work in an industry where you got to be very, very, very careful. So you have to be smart, where you jeopardize the old fan/professionalism, and that's where a few of these ones kind of really conflict. But not John Wood and I could have done it. Never had but at least I've got the interview, so that isn't so bad. One guy, and I was too young for this to happen, was my grandfather, Sidney Morganroth. He died when I was 10 years of age. Don't know if we ever had a photo with him, but I'll tell you, he was my hero growing up as a kid for the 10 years I had. He died of lung cancer, and I vowed that when I was the age of 10, and I vowed to never smoke. And to this day, nearly 48 years later, I haven't done it. So, I mean,
good for you.
Yeah, I've never. I'll see. I'm 57 now, and 47 years. I mean, either way, I mean, for 40 plus years, he died of lung cancer. And my tribute to him, Grandpa, I will never die because of lung cancer because I smoke. And to this day, I've owned that promise, and I'm just grateful. But yeah, that one hits closer to home. Sidney Morganroth. Another one that might be a little outrageous for most people might be Dennis Rodman, formerly of the Detroit Pistons. But here's where I could have gotten Rodman. I saw him at a bowling alley at West Bloomfield, Michigan, and with his wife and his young daughter, when he was no tattoos, very straight-laced Dennis Rodman over at West Bloomfield Lanes. And, Dennis looks at we decided to bowl a game. He said to me, boy, you got the most unusual form on the planet. I said, well, Dennis, let me tell you something, brother. Your free throw shooting isn't very good either. But meanwhile, we were friends, though. He was like a friend of mine in the locker room, and every time I need an interview, Dennis was always there for me. So we decided to play like 2 games. And I'll tell you what, okay, we'll take my most unusual form and yours, and let's have a little bit of fun. We played 2 games, and I tell you what, he beat me the first game and beat me pretty good. Well, good enough to win, whether it's a pin or who remembers the score. So I told Dennis, well, I'll tell you what, double or nothing. If I win, you got to pay for both games, and if you win, I pay for them both. No problem. It's just a simple bet for the guy. I did beat him, by the way, and he ended up paying the games, but we had a lot of fun. But Dennis was always a real favorite of mine, and we hit it off real well when I was covering the Pistons on a regular basis during the Bad Boys era. Here's a name that'll probably rock you. James Earl Jones. Everybody knows him for the Lion King. My ex-wife and I went to the Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, the first fight, and we sat next to James Earl Jones, and it was just too surreal, way up in the MGM grand thing. Well, great fight. I even paid the $50 for the second one, and I got my head bit off while Tyson bit Holyfield's ear off for spending the $50. Yeah. It's safe to say. But here's one that nobody will ever remember, but this is one that really lies dear to me. His name is Sonny Hirsch. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. People in South Florida probably have. Sonny Hirsch used to actually be the general manager of the Miami Marlins in Class A baseball, and was a big part of South Florida baseball. And I got to know him when I was working with the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, and he was a real legend behind the microphone, calling Miami Hurricanes games and with the Marlins. And Sonny and I used to go ahead and have a lot of great stories. And his nameplate and tribute is in the Marlins Park press box. So that was pretty cool. Another one a lot of people might be familiar. You might be familiar with him is Congressman Jack Kemp. Remember him?
Oh yeah. I played quarterback for the Bills.
Exactly. I met him over at Super Bowl 39 when the Patriots took on the Eagles. And when I told him where I was from, he gave me a interview like I have, and he was doing something for USA Football, and I actually have a thank you letter from his people there. So that's the closest thing I got to a photo. And here's one that I'll tell you what, most people don't realize, and it might actually segue into what we're doing later. Great friend of mine for a lot of years, and God love him. Ever heard of Lee Remmel?
No, I don't. The name sounds familiar, but I don't.
Well, it should sound familiar, especially in the eyes of Green Bay Packers people. Lee Remmel was a PR guy for the Green Bay Packers and historian for a lot of years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you know what? Every time I needed to get a pass up in Green Bay, along with Mike Murray and Bill Keenest, Lee took care of me. I never had a problem, and we would always hang out in the press box talking football. And I'll never forget when I covered my first Super Bowl 33, that Lee Remmel and Mike Murray gave me the biggest lectures you will ever get when they saw that my first Super Bowl, and I was so overwhelmed, I got lectured by both of these two guys. So will you calm down, relax, and take it in instead of getting overwhelmed? I had two separate lectures. Mike Murray gave it to me good, and then Lee Remmel decided, it's my turn to hammer you two. And meanwhile, both of them, we exchanged hugs like you wouldn't believe. Lee Remmel was a favorite of mine. So all you Packer fans that are listening out there, Lee Remmel was the best. Okay. So,
well, that just jogged a memory. I believe I told you, about the Doc Emmerich story that I was friends with Pat Burns, who coached the New Jersey Devils at that time, the Boston Bruins, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens. Well, a good friend of mine, Mike, was up in New Hampshire where Pat lived, and he was a huge hockey fan. He still is to this day. So I said to him, if you got some time this afternoon, we'll go over to the sports bar. Pat usually comes by in the afternoon for a little bit on his Harley, and we'll talk some hockey with him. And he kept saying, "Don't tell me you talked hockey with Pat Burns." He didn't believe me. So I said, "Yeah." So. And Mike is a great big guy. I mean, he looks like a pro football player himself.
Does he really?
And, he's a big, huge dude, right? So we're sitting there at the bar, and then I hear Pat's Harley come up, and he comes walking in, and he, gives me a little hug across the shoulder. He's like, "What's up, hey?" So we're sitting there shooting the breeze. I was like, "I want to introduce you to my friend Mike." Now, picture this big, huge guy, and his mouth is wide open. And Pat's looking at him, and he's kind of smiling. He's like, "How you doing?" And Mike shook his hand, but no words would come out of his mouth. So then Pat just gave him a break for a minute, and he turned back to me, and we were shooting the breeze. And so he ordered a drink, and we were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, like, my buddy Mike came out of it. Wow. And he was like, "Oh my God, I got so many things." And Pat said, "Okay, calm down. I'm going to be here all afternoon." He goes, "We were worried about you there for a second. I thought you went catatonic on us."
Really? Wow, that's pretty interesting stuff. That is really interesting stuff. I'll go over a couple more names, I think, and then we'll go ahead and talk a little bit NFL football, which we do, but this is such a great lighthearted topic that it was worth the first 30 minutes of this broadcast going over a few names. It really has been a lot of fun going over it. It certainly makes us regret a whole lot more, but we don't care. At least for now, we have it on air. I would have loved to have had a photo with Billy Martin. I actually worked with him during his spring training when the Yankees were in Fort Lauderdale. What I do have in common with Billy Martin, though, I mean, Billy treated me nice, was the day he got killed on December 25th, 1989, was a time I tore my ankle skiing up in Magic Mountain in Londonderry, Vermont. How do you like to associate an accident with a guy like Billy Martin? Well, when did I tear up my ankle? Oh, when Billy Martin died. Good. Hit that thing called Google, and then when you got busted up. So go figure. Another one that I think is pretty interesting to me is a guy by the name of Joe Falls. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Joe Falls is a legendary Detroit sports writer, and Joe and I, to me, has as good a relationship you could ever have. You want to talk about me pulling a snow job on somebody? Joe definitely walked into this one. Joe and I are covering the Lions and the Pittsburgh Steelers over at Three Rivers Stadium. And I told him, God, you talk about the biggest poker face you could ever have. I had it his time. I said, I have a gut feeling, and my sources tell me that the Atlanta Falcons are going to draft Ellis Gerback. He said, So he said, Scotty, you really need to go ahead and tell me where you're getting these sources from. I said, Joe, if I tell you this, though, I'm telling you, this is just between me and you. So and I'm giving him this stare down like, look, all right, now you got me jacked here. I said, I'll tell you why. Because Jerry Glanville is the coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and there was a point when Jerry Glanville left a ticket for Elvis Presley at will call, and it never got picked up. So if he couldn't get Elvis Presley to show up to a game, he's going to get an Elvis, and he got Elvis Burr back. And Joe looked at me and said, that was good. So when I saw Joe at Comerica Park around 2000 when I was going through a divorce, he knew that something wasn't right with me. This guy could take me apart, read me like a clear piece of plastic. And what's wrong with you? Is anything wrong? Just going through a tough period, going through a divorce. He said, listen, Scotty, let me tell you this. Now, like everybody that likes me, they call me Scotty. Okay, that's just good. You call me whatever you want. You're my buddy anyways. But still, listen, I went through this thing one time, was married once for 20 years. I got it right the second time. All you need to do is learn from what happened the first time, and then everything will be good. And every time I needed words of wisdom, okay, Joe Falls was there, and he was just a great guy. But all together, rest in peace, Joe. And he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame for whatever it's worth, which means a lot to me. A few other ones I want to mention here. That Brent Musburger was actually at a Christmas game over in Orlando. Again, no camera, sitting in a lounge for lunch, okay, on Christmas Day. And I actually met Brent Musburger many years ago at the 82 Final Four, but it caught me off guard on that Christmas Day. And, I'll let everybody go. And Bob Feller, the former Cleveland Indians Hall of Famer, I have an autograph from him and of his picture in my archives. I never had that old camera phone. So I think I have a pretty good list there. For anybody that wants the rest of this list, they can go to southfloridatribune.com and they'll be able to get it. But those are just a few. So with that said, now that we can compare horror stories about what should have been, okay, at least we can go out there and mention some of the really good ones, and we'll whet the appetite for the article later. With that said, okay, let's talk about a football game featuring the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers. But before I do that, Steve, I want to take time to pass on my condolences to Todd Shepik and Dawn Shepik. Todd lost his mother, Jill, and also my condolences to Wayne Shepik and my sister-in-law, Marie, and Dawn's husband. Jill lost a very courageous battle. I believe it was to Alzheimer's disease. She passed away last night. So I want to pay tribute to Jill Shepik. Rest in peace, sweetheart. And for the time that I've known you, which is up a good 6-7 years, you were one of the sweetest people on the planet. So on behalf of everybody here at the Sports Exchange, Steve Balestrieri, we want to rest in peace, Jill. God love you, and it's been a privilege to know who you are. So I want to get that out before we get onto the serious stuff. So thanks for allowing me to say that, Steve. I appreciate it. So
not a problem. Bill Belichick lost his mom last night as well.
Oh, did she really? Wow.
Yeah, 98. She lived to be 98 years old.
Yeah, and just so you know, after the Sports Exchange tonight, Candy Ebley and I will be doing a tribute on No Limits to tributes to mothers out there. So we encourage a lot of you folks when it gets up there to go ahead and listen to both shows. And of course, Steve Balestrieri and I are going to be doing we're going to be doing some South Florida Tribune broadcasts via Zoom. We're hoping that we'll start next week, big guy, and we'll be able to take it visual. So enjoy your last time doing it totally audio, even though all of our shows will be audio, plus the visual. So with that said...
Yeah, well, I have a face made for radio, my friend.
And you know what? I got one, too. I don't think I was the ideal picturesque TV guy, but all of a sudden this thing called visual, we make it out there. So you and I make two radio buds anyway. Now we're going to take it to a level, and who cares? Well, it'll be show and tell, and that's what we do well here. So... well, that's that with the show and tell theme. Let's go on to the NFL. All right. And this week, the Detroit Lions take on the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Once upon a time, one of the biggest mistakes ever by the Detroit Lions was when they let Wisconsin native Jim Caldwell go, and yet he snapped a long losing streak over at Lambeau Field. but the Lions and the Packers renew acquaintances this week. Now, for all you Lions fans that are looking for an obituary that occurred on Sunday, Steve, let's go over the first game here, all right? Shall we?
Yep.
We'll go ahead and talk about the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers this week. As I mentioned before, there was an obituary that occurred over at Ford Field called the Lions blowing a 21-point lead to the Chicago Bears. With that said, okay, the Bears scored 21 unanswered points to carve out the win. What do you think about that?
Well, that game was a shocker because I thought the Lions would have that one, especially being at home. And then I thought they had a really solid lead going in. I mean, what was it, 23-6 going into the fourth quarter, and then everything kind of fell apart on them defensively, and Mitch Trubisky started looking like Aaron Rodgers back there. But even still, I mean, when they went down late in the game, I thought Stafford did a great job moving them down the field, puts them in a position to win. He threw, I thought it was a beautiful pass in the end zone. The rookie running back couldn't hold on.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift. I mean, I think offensively, the Lions are going to be okay. Again, you and I talked offline. Adrian Peterson, what did he run for, 93 or 94 yards, I thought, on Sunday? Which is really, I mean, that was a really nice game. We know Stafford can air the ball out. It's defensively is going to be a big question mark for these guys, and it doesn't get any easier with the Packers this week.
No, not by a long shot. When I think about a Lions collapse like that, I hate to bring up the death theme, but my mother-in-law had died, and we happened to, and on the anniversary of when Candy had an opportunity, the Lions gave up a game like you wouldn't believe. They had the game in hand, another collapse later on, and as a result, there was that Hale Rodgers, and I'll never forget. I'm telling my colleague George Eichhorn down in the Lions press area, I have a bad feeling about this game because the Lions got that last penalty. There was one time down, and there was that Hail Mary, and the Packers pulled off an improbable win. And I'm thinking to myself, as much as I love the Lions, I was happy for my wife that she got a birthday present to see her only trip to Ford Field when the Lions lost to Rodgers on that Hail Mary. It was just unbelievable. So, yeah. But meanwhile, another game decided later on when the Lions could have won it, but they should never have given up that 21 points. Matt Patricia's been not broke on that day. And just to answer your question about Peterson, the 93 yards is what he did on the ground. And believe it or not, what's interesting about that stat, how about a 6.6 average with a 21 long as well. So that to me is unreal, this guy. I mean, you talk about a guy who definitely has had his Wheaties, mark my word, and I'll tell you, he reminds me of Frank Gore is what he does.
Right. You and I were talking offline about that earlier today because we were like, I don't know what Wheaties they're eating, but I think we all need to invest in those because those two guys, they're still bringing it, and at an age when most running backs are long since retired.
Well, and if you want to talk about Adrian Peterson, he had 3 catches for 21 yards. So do the math. 93 plus 21 is definitely over 100 for sure. So all right, let's talk about the Lions and the Packers this week. Are they going to go 0-2? I mean, I think the Packers came off a very impressive win in Minnesota opening week, and the Lions could be 0-2. And Matt Patricia could be, if his seat wasn't hot, it's going to get hotter with an 0-2 start against 2 divisional opponents in the first 2 weeks of the year.
Yeah, I think, the seat for Matt Patricia is going to get really warm because you go back to it was the last game of the year last year. The Lions and the Packers, and Rodgers threw for about 300 yards. Couple of touchdowns, and it ended up being a close game. I think it was 23-20, but he threw 300 yards, two or three touchdowns. And I'm looking at that, and are the Lions going to be able to stop them? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that they can. Again, you're putting a lot of pressure on your quarterback, Matt Stafford, that he's going to have to try to keep up. That's not fair. It's not fair to him.
Yeah, I love Matthew Stafford, the quarterback, and the Lions defense made Mitchell Trubisky look good. The guy goes for 20 for 36 or 242 yards and 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. Talk about making a guy look good. They made him look good, and if the Lions had any problems in their secondary, Jimmy Graham bit them with 3 receptions for a touchdown. So go figure. The Lions definitely have a lot of problems, and I actually think they're gonna get smoked in Green Bay. I really do, for some crazy reason or another. And ironically, unfortunately, when the Lions broke their long drought up in Green Bay, my mother-in-law had passed away that day, but that was just irrelevant. But nevertheless, with Jill Shepik, I have a feeling that Jill Shepik won't have to deal with that because the Lions are going to get smoked. And I think they're going to lose.
I don't have a lot of high hopes for them this week in Lambeau. I mean, Rodgers had a really good game last week. He threw 4 touchdowns. I think, like I said, offensively, I think the Lions are in a good place. I think they can move the ball about against anyone. Now they have Adrian Peterson, the running game is going to be good. As much as people were bashing Swift for dropping that pass, I think he's going to be a pretty good back for that. Danny Amendola had a big game for the Lions last week. And, you and I last week, we were talking about T.J. Hawkinson. And I thought he had a really nice, solid game. And he caught a touchdown from Matthew Stafford. So offensively, I like where the Lions are at. I think they can score against anybody. It's just defensively, I don't think, you're putting too much on your quarterback if he has to win every game 35-31.
No question about. Well, Danny Amendola had 5 receptions for 81 yards, and you talked about T.J. Hawkinson, 5 receptions, 56 yards, and had a touchdown to it. So I think T.J. Hawkinson. Now, would it be safe to say that T.J. Hawkinson and Rob Gronkowski, can you put them in the same sentence? Even though obviously Gronk has a lot more wear and tear and has the hardware, because I think T.J. Hawkinson's a good-looking tight end.
Oh yeah, and when he came out in the draft, I really liked him.
Did you?
And yeah, I did. I thought he was going to be a really, really good football player, and I haven't changed my opinion. And he had a little bit of a rough rookie season, but that's not that's not rare. A lot of rookies have a tough time. I think he's going to have a really good year this year. I think, and he's also a good start. I thought he had a really good game on Sunday, and I think as time goes on, he's going to be that security blanket for Matthew Stafford, because quarterbacks love having that big tight end. When they have to check down or they see the blitz coming, and once they get that chemistry with that big tight end, they tend to go to those guys. Brady had it with Gronkowski.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes has it with Kelsey. The Eagles have a couple of good tight ends, and that's how all that works. I think he's got a nice career at him.
Well, Greg Olson's been a security blanket for a lot of quarterbacks too. We'll talk about the Lions and the Packers, just and I'm not a big point spread type of person, but they're looking at the total over under at 49 and a 6-point spread for the Packers. So I think the Packers easily, and I repeat, easily covered, because that bend but not break, seems to break more when you're talking about Matt Patricia, a guy that to me
take the over.
Yeah, right. I would. Yeah. I mean, I think the over's safe, and 49. I actually see this game turning into like 41-10 or 41-17 in favor of the Packers. That's what I think. So we'll find out next week. Since I'll have to. So what did I say? 41-10 or 41-17. Either way, I think the Packers are going to win it regardless. So oh, well, Matt Patricia, sorry. I guess for a lot of those people that say fire Bob Quinn, fire Matt Patricia, you'll be closer to that when the Lambeau Field haunts you yet again. So let's move on to another game, one that we obviously talked about last week. The New England Patriots beat the Miami Dolphins 21-11. Cam Newton looked good, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And again, we spoke beforehand, before the game last week, and we were talking about the questions I had, not talent-wise. It was more, with him. He had been on the Patriots for such a very short amount of time. I was worried that he wouldn't have that grasp of the offense down quite yet. And, I was worried about that. That was one of my concerns. And he seemed like he's been on the team for quite a while now. I thought he ran the offense really well. He ran the ball extremely well. He seems healthy again. The run-pass options, he rushed 15 times for 75 yards. That was really 14 and 76 because he took a knee at the end of the game. But I thought he ran real well. He was very, very productive in the passing game. He only threw 19 passes, but he completed 15, and of those, one was a drop by Julian Edelman, and two were batted down at the line. So, I thought he was throwing the ball well. He was putting it where he wanted to. And they got the running game going with him starting off. Of course, he was a very big part of that, but they ran the ball for 217 yards on the ground. Right. And that, when you're running the ball that well, that usually means the clock is running in your favor, and that defense starts to get tired.
Yeah, I thought what was interesting in that game, and I love watching this, is Cam Newton sitting on the sidelines with Josh McDaniels. How many times did you see that with Tom Brady? Newton and his offensive core. I mean, this is great. That's what makes Josh Daniels give you that one-on-one kind of thing with his quarterback. Great communication. Now, I'm looking at the numbers right now, even though Newton was sacked twice, big cotton-picking deal. He may not have done his numbers are interesting. 15 rushes, 75 yards, along with 2 rushing touchdowns. And he was a game manager. He didn't throw for any touchdowns, but he didn't get any interceptions either. So, but watching Josh McDaniels sit next to Cam Newton, first game, 1-0, looked all right. Again, we keep talking about it. We'll talk about it till we're blue in the face. No preseason games. And this was his first act. And I think a really impressive win for the Patriots. I did say that I felt the Patriots could be a 10-6 team, and I'll stand by that pick. And, who knows, they could be 11-5, but they didn't look too bad. Again, maybe am I rushing to judgment too quick on Cam Newton? No, I'm not, and I'll tell you why. Belichick will let him do what he's strong at, and having Josh McDaniels and Cam Newton communicating the way they are, Cam Newton will only get better as time goes on. And, again, you still have some capable weapons out there with Julian Edelman. And, of course, even though James White was somewhat quiet, to me, he's always a factor. I mean, the Patriots like to spread the football out there anyways, but Sony Michel's out there to get touchdowns. Patriots will be fine. So, Miami Dolphins.
Offensively, they still have some work to do in the passing game. I still think they need a wide receiver. But, I was very pleased with, what we saw from Newton for the first game. His grasp for the offense. The players obviously have a great deal of confidence in him. You could see that on the sideline, in the game, in the huddle. That's just that's a big thing for them is having that confidence. And, one of the things that he did, speaking of Newton, that I thought was really good was after his second touchdown, he gave the football to David Andrews, the center, to Spike. And after the game, they said, well, why'd you give it to David? And Newton wasn't on the Patriots last year. He said, well, he was in the same boat as me. He missed all season. And he's coming back from an injury, and I wanted him to share in that. Yeah. And that speaks volumes of, how these guys are already pulling together. And, we'll have to see. But so far, as I said, everything is looking really good. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But speaking of James White, I mean, we talk about him all the time in the passing game, and he's with one more touchdown, because I believe I'd have to double check the exact amount, but I believe he has 37 receiving touchdowns in his career, and he's played in 78 games. Well, Brian Westbrook, remember, for the Philadelphia Eagles,
right?
He has one more touchdown in his first 87 games, which is 9 more. So if James White gets a receiving touchdown in the next couple of weeks, he'll move ahead of where Brian Westbrook was at that time. So that tells you how valuable he's been for the Patriots coming out of the backfield.
Well, he's a hybrid running back. Obviously, can catch the football, and his rushing numbers are. Are they going to daunt you with fantasy? I don't care. I don't follow fantasy a lot. But all I know is what James White does when it comes to Super Bowls in the postseason. He's definitely very visible there. So that goes without saying. But, again, I preface the fact that no preseason games, and Cam Newton is looking solid. And he will get better easily. Just needs a couple more games. So looking forward to monitoring the progress of Cam Newton. So with that said, from Cam Newton to Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost to New Orleans Saints 34-23 over New Orleans. Bruce Arians wasn't too happy with his newest quarterback, and I don't think Tom Brady's initial reviews look pretty good. So what are your thoughts about Tommy?
He did not look very good on Sunday. I thought he struggled for the most part. To look at the numbers from a distance, 23 of 36 for 239 and 2 touchdowns. It's not that bad, but he had 2 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6. And after the game, Arians clearly put the onus on Brady for both of them. Now, on Monday, he backtracked off the first one and said that it wasn't Brady's fault. After he watched the film, it was Mike Evans' fault. Evans read the wrong coverage. So, but that way it wasn't a good look all around for the Bucs. Everyone's been tooting their horn for them, including myself. So to come out and kind of lay an egg on week 1 wasn't a really good look, and then have your head coach throw your brand new quarterback under the bus. It's like, boy, they need a comeback win next week.
Did Bill Belichick ever throw quarterbacks under the bus at all?
No, Belichick would never criticize a player personally. If somebody said, "Well, that you guys struggled with your pass rush," maybe one of the tackles gave up a couple of sacks or whatever, Belichick would always say, "Well, it was all across the board. We need to block better. We need to tackle better. We need to coach better." That's his mantra. So, he never got individually on anyone's case with the press. Now, we all know that behind the scenes, that was one of the issues with him and Brady, that he would rip Brady in the film room with the team, even when the Patriots played well.
Really? So my question to you, and I have a problem with a coach ripping his quarterback in the press. I really do. If you're going to do it, you do it internally. Obviously, Tom Brady better realize that. Does he prefer to get ripped in the press or behind the scenes? I don't know. Where do you... Well, I
don't think anyone likes being ripped publicly.
Right.
That's some uncharted territory there. But, I think even the Bucs themselves had much higher expectations. I didn't think they looked good at all, in any phase of the game. I didn't think their running game got going as I expected it would. Their defense did not look good again. That was an issue with them last year.
Right.
They're back to the drawing board. They have a game on Sunday against Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, they have a divisional game So
yep, another divisional game. It's going to be another rock fight for him.
Yeah, it will. I mean, don't kid yourself. Ronald Jones II was touted heavily in the Bucs backfield, had 17 rushes, 50 for 66 yards. And Tom Brady got the touchdown rushing. Mm-hmm. But then when you look at his, and I didn't expect Leonard Fournette to do anything. 5 carries, 5 yards, but it was only his first game after being claimed off the scrap heap. So, but I mean, I don't think anybody in the Bucs receiving core really did well. Chris Godwin, 6 for 79. So they're definitely a work in progress. So
yeah, I was surprised with Evans too, because I thought Evans would have a much bigger game than he ended up with. What did he have? He only had 1 catch for 2 yards.
Yeah, that's all he had. Yeah, that's it. So, but those numbers don't look too good to me. I mean, Tom Brady, obviously, everybody talked about Jameis Winston throwing a lot of interceptions, and albeit he went to the 33 club for all the wrong reasons. And again, I'm not pinpointing everything on Tom Brady. I know there's a lot of hype going into it. And hope and pray that he gets it worked out in the first few weeks. Otherwise, Bruce Arians, I don't know how long Brady will tolerate Arians throwing him under the bus.
Yeah, that would be something to keep an eye on there. So I think they're going to be very motivated to play well on Sunday against the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, the Panthers themselves, when you look at their first act over the weekend, they lost to the Raiders 34-30, but that was a pretty entertaining game from what I've heard. So,
yeah, I caught the end of that, and it was a very good game. And again, the Raiders had been up, they fell behind, and then came back to win it. It was a good game. Josh Jacobs ran for just under 100 yards. I think it was 93. And Derek Carr threw for about 240 and a touchdown. But Teddy Bridgewater, I thought, had a pretty good game for himself, Carolina.
Well, Josh Jacobs had a heck of a game. You kidding? The guy, 25 rushes, 93 yards, but he cashed in on 3 touchdowns, like you said. And he also was a threat out of the backfield as well, 4 for 46 as well. So you talk about a guy that is a multi-dimensional player. He's definitely one of them for sure.
Yeah, and Christian McCaffrey is always Christian McCaffrey. So,
right.
That's it. I think he's going to have a really big game against the Bucs.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's talk about Bridgewater's numbers for his first game. 269 yards for a touchdown pass. And then, as you said, Christian McCaffrey, 23 rushes for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Christian McCaffrey just, and if you want to add another 38 yards out of the backfield, do it. His numbers are over, their numbers are Christian McCaffrey, like over 100 all-purpose yards with a couple of touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey's a jewel when it comes to fantasy numbers. So let's talk about one other featured game of the week, which we talked about later on. Also occurred in the Sunshine State. Never thought we'd be talking to it here, but why not? I think this is one where the 2 words house money apply. And what I mean by that is the Jacksonville Jaguars defeated the Indianapolis Colts. Get this for numbers. Gardner Minshew, if you can find me a much better line than this, please do it. Okay. He goes 19 for 20, 173 yards, 3 touchdowns, albeit he was sacked 4 times. But this guy throws for 3 touchdown passes. And to make matters more interesting, he rushes 5 times for 19 yards with a long of 11. I don't think that the Jaguars right now, to me, look like they're tanking for Trevor. Do you?
No, it certainly didn't seem that way. And one person that you can tell is Gardner Minshew. I mean, he completed 95% of his passes.
Yeah.
19 of 20, 173, 3 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of 142.3. It doesn't get much higher than that.
No.
I thought he had an outstanding game. And again, going into this one, I thought that the Colts were going to win this one rather easily. They brought in Phillip Rivers this year, who had a big game. He threw for 363 yards, but only one touchdown and 2 picks.
Yeah.
And they let this one get away from them, and it cost them big time. I mean, I going into this game, I had the Colts almost as a lock. I mean, everyone was talking about Jacksonville, like you mentioned, tanking for Trevor.
Right.
And they didn't play that way.
Well, one thing that didn't help their situation was Marlon Mack left the game with an Achilles injury. It looks like he's done for the year. He's on injured reserve. So Achilles injuries are painful. I haven't had those. I've had a lot of injuries, but not that one. So the one guy I think down the road who will have to make an impact is Jonathan Taylor, the guy out of Wisconsin. But when you think about Rivers, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, forget about the 363 yards. The Chargers fans saw this way too many times last year, which is why he became expendable after a while. It's high risk, high reward. And Rivers, to me, hasn't done anything extraordinary in the postseason where the Colts thought that he would be the answer to their issues. Obviously, to me, T.Y. Hilton didn't light it up either as a guy who only had 4 catches for 53 yards. So there's no question that the Colts have a lot of work to do. So were there any surprises, though, about who we'll look at the standings, who stood out at you?
Well, in this game or just in general?
In general.
Yeah. The biggest surprise to me, and I know that they were shorthanded, but when I saw the Eagles up 17-0.
Right.
And then Washington comes back and scores 27 unanswered points. That to me was I thought it was a shocker. Again, looking at the games ahead of time, and of course it's week 1.
Right. So
a lot of things tend to happen on week 1, but the game we just talked about with the Jaguars and this one with I said Washington Redskins, but the Washington football team.
Everybody's saying it, so don't feel too bad. Take a little while.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to get used to that.
Yeah.
But you know what I meant. Washington coming back against the Eagles, I thought was a shocker.
Yeah.
I thought the Eagles would have taken them to the woodshed.
Well, everybody did. I mean, let's not kid yourself. Dwayne Haskins Jr. obviously threw for a touchdown. He had 178 yards. Not great numbers, but you know what? He was a good game manager. And you know what? With all due respect, I hear Ron Rivera had to go in halftime to get some cancer treatments or whatever, some IVs and all that. But that didn't stop me. I have Jack Del Rio there if they needed him. But Washington didn't have that good of an offseason. You think about it. They have to deal with the issue with the name with the Redskins. Then they're having all these sexual allegations and the way they treated employees. But to think that Ron Rivera, to me, is probably the best thing that happened to him in the offseason. Indeed was. And Ron Rivera, don't kid yourself, he's been a winner at Carolina. I still, for some reason or another, even though his time came to an end in Carolina, the Washington football team and Dan Snyder could not have gotten a better individual to run this football team. They really couldn't have. And more power to him. I hope Dwayne Haskins, to me, has an opportunity to go out there and develop in it. And I think Rivera seems intent to think that he probably could. That's for sure. I mean, I'm looking at some of these other games right now, and I think one of the most intriguing was Tennessee Titans beating the Broncos 16-14. But I think you ought to know that Steve Gostkowski ended up going ahead and had 3 missed field goals.
3 missed field goals. One of them was blocked in the first half, but yeah, he missed 3 field goals, and I believe he missed an extra point too. And this guy was, for most of his career, he was money for the Patriots. Yeah. And then he hurt his hip last year, and he's had some nagging injuries for a couple of years, and his accuracy has gone down a little bit. And, he was let go by New England this spring. I was surprised no one picked him up right away. And then Tennessee did, kind of late. And so he didn't have much work. But, yeah, he missed 3 field goals and an extra point. And I think you can say that Mr. Groskowski's seat is getting really warm because, if you're a football team, you can't have that.
Uh-huh. No,
can't have it. So, he'll need a bounce back week this week as well.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's look ahead to week 2. All right. Well, I'll go over some of these games. And here's, you've got, let's see, I'm looking at some key games. Are there any that stand out to you? The Sunday night game is going to be the Patriots and the Seahawks. Cam Newton against Russell Wilson. That one's very interesting.
Yeah, and, Russell Wilson has given the Patriots hits every time he's played them because of that RPO, issue that he can put it on a team and that factor, with the run pass option. And he's with his mobility, he's given the Patriots a really hard time now. They're not the same type of player. But, at least now practicing against, Cam Newton every day, they're seeing more of that. So it'll be interesting to see if the Patriots can contain Russell Wilson a little bit better than they have in the past. Even the Super Bowl that they won, I thought Wilson had a really, really good game.
Yeah. Did you have a chance to see that Sunday night game, the Rams and the Cowboys?
I saw bits and pieces of it. I was actually trying to get some work done. Mm-hmm. So I was watching it in between, trying to work, which was a bad thing for both. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to see the whole game. And then my post-game piece that I was writing for another organization there, it got kind of sloppy. I ended up having to rewrite it anyway. So, I did catch parts of it. I thought that was a pretty good football game.
Yeah, but what about the stadium? $5 billion could buy a pretty nice place, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like when it's full.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know.
It is, it's pretty impressive, isn't it?
It did look pretty good. I mean, I was pretty busy that night, too, but I was watching it back and forth. Well, another stadium will be utilized for the first time either. The Saints go out to Las Vegas, and they're putting their chips on the line. We'll see whether they lose more money at casinos or whether they lose a football game to the Raiders, a new temptation for visiting teams. So Allegiant Stadium makes its debut with the Raiders. Any thoughts about the Monday night game since these new stadiums are getting some early publicity?
That should be a really good game to watch. And, kind of lost in the talk about Sunday with Tom Brady was Drew Brees didn't have a great game either.
Oh, he didn't.
I think Brady has a much worse game, but it didn't seem like vintage Drew Brees to me. Alvin Kamara is obviously Alvin Kamara, but that's going to be an interesting game to watch because, you mentioned him earlier. Josh Jacobs could be kind of a difference maker for these Raiders. It'll be, I'm curious to see if they can get any kind of running game going. Because if they can, then slow that clock down,
right, or
actually speed it up, really. I mean, but, you slow the game down and you're limiting Breeze's, possessions of the football. I think it's going to be a good game. I still like the Saints in that one, but it wouldn't shock me if the Raiders won.
Well, I mean, I'll back up your point about Drew Brees. 18 for 30, 160 yards, no touchdowns. He did get sacked once. And then we'll talk about the key contributor in that game was, yes, you guessed it, okay? You actually have Alvin Kamara, who, to me, had a touchdown by rushing, and he also had one in the air. So it just goes to show you that Kamara, they signed him an extension, and they need him. And Emmanuel Sanders got a touchdown, too. Fresh off the 49ers. So, you're right. I think it'll be, it makes you really wonder, do some of these older quarterbacks really need the extra preseason games to try to get in shape a little bit quicker? That makes you wonder because none of them look great. Rivers struggled. Brady did. So did Breeze, just to name a few.
Yeah, and, there's something to be said for that. especially the older guys, they're used to that grind of training camp, and they get their body into it, and then they get their timing down and their chemistry going. It's not so much that the starters play a lot in the preseason, but I think, during a normal training camp and preseason, I think they get a lot more work than what we saw them get this year.
Okay, one other note I want to mention. We'll talk about the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers. Kyler Murray looked pretty decent, actually, 230 yards. He threw for a touchdown. He also rushed for one. So this kid's a dynamic player. I'm just saying. And, of course, if you're the Houston Texans and you're looking at the numbers of DeAndre Hopkins, this will be a head scratcher. Only 14 receptions for 251 yards. Hello. And considering how bad the Texans look on
Thursday night, I know. And you look at that and you're like, what exactly were they thinking about trading Nuke? I mean, I don't know. I didn't like the trade, and, after the first week, and again, it's still very early, but, it just doesn't seem like it was a really good move of theirs.
No, I struggle with that a little bit, too. I mean, with all due respect, though, when you look at the other side of the trade, David Johnson did rush for 11 times for 77 yards and did get a touchdown. And he added 32 yards out of the backfield. But when they talk about the overall picture of the whole thing, I don't know, I think the Cardinals made out like bandits there. No, I'm not talking about the Tampa Bay Bandits. I'm talking about bandits. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Hopkins, like you said, 14 catches, 151 yards. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And now he's going against the Redskins this weekend, out in Arizona. So I think he's going to have another big game.
Yeah, you think?
I wouldn't be surprised to see him with another dozen receptions this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and their game is at home, so I think the Cardinals are going to have a fine. Yeah, they could be a sleeper team. You just never know what's going to happen in the NFL year in and year out. So, any closing thoughts before we wrap up the broadcast?
Well, there's, like you said, there's some interesting games going on this week. 2 0-1 teams, the Colts and the Vikings, are playing. And again, I think that's a big game. As early as it is this, in the season, I think that's going to be a really big game, as well as the Falcons and the Cowboys.
How do you like?
Because these are teams that can't afford to start 0-2.
How do you like the Thursday night matchup? Cincinnati Bengals against the Cleveland Browns? Really? That's the best they could do?
I've been on record. I hate Thursday night football anyway.
Right.
Like they do opening weekend, I would rather see a doubleheader on Monday night than that. I've never been a big fan of Thursday night football. It's always some of the worst games that you'll see during the season because of the short week. So, and as Thursday night games go, this one is, I wouldn't put it at the top of my list.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow isn't what you call the real fillet of the matchups for sure. So, I mean,
Burrow could end up being a really, good football player in the NFL, but right now, those two teams, it's like, that's not what I'm really looking forward to watching all the way through.
Well, I don't worry about it. I'm broadcasting 2 broadcasts that night anyway, so I don't care about the only time I ever cared about Thursday football, to be honest with you, is on Thanksgiving. I'm okay with it that day because it's traditional. But other than that, I agree. I'd rather have the Monday night doubleheader, but that's not for us to decide. It's just for us to comment on. So, with that said, Steve, okay, we'll go ahead and. What I'd like you to do is let everybody know how they can get a hold of you and give me your information, and we get ready for next Wednesday's broadcast. I want to point out to you, next Wednesday's edition of the Sports Exchange will be with Steve and I, but we'll be doing it through, not only through the necessary audio outlets, but we're going to be doing our first broadcast via Zoom in the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So, Steve, looking forward to doing that. We'll have the internet to kick around, which I think we'll be fine with. So, I'm looking forward to doing visual from this point forward, and then ultimately look forward to meeting you and your other half when we go out to the Fort Myers area. So with that said, Steve, why don't you let everybody know how they can reach you, get a hold of you, and whatnot?
Well, thanks again for having me. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
You can get a hold of me on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I write for PatsFans.com. I also write for SoftRep.com. So, and if you're interested in any kind of Patriots-related stuff, you can find me doing a podcast called Patriots 4th and 2.
Beautiful. In terms of us, you can find the Sports Exchange wherever you get your podcasts, or you can do it through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast. I'll say it again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Other ways to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Tribune South, Facebook, and Instagram, South Florida Tribune. We have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Future broadcasts of this with Steve and I will be on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Well, website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll find all of our broadcasts on there, as well as we will have our media distribution partners, as well as the columnists. And we're also going to be adding something to it as well for our Detroit audience called Motor City Monitor. Since I have big ties to the area, I do a lot of work with them. We'll be having a lot of specialized stuff from Detroit as well. But we do national, and of course, you never want to forget where you got things going. So that's something that you can look for as well. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. And what's so great about Twitter is I got to meet Steve Balestrieri, and you talk about some great ways to meet people. You know what? You can meet him anywhere, especially on the 3 outlets that we talked about. But Steve is a good friend. Before we get off the air, I do want to mention, everybody, that COVID-19 is here. We ask you that you please mask up, do the proper social distancing that you need to do, and stay safe, stay at home if necessary, but take whatever precautions that you have, because this virus is all too dangerous. Right, Steve? Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, stay safe, folks. I mean, let's not have any more outbreaks of this stuff. Let's get through this football season. Let's enjoy it and do what we have to do so fans can start getting back in the stand.
Absolutely. So, meanwhile, job well done, Steve, and we'll look forward to the next edition of the Sports Exchange. I guess I have to find out what my Packers prediction is going to be like, the 41-10, 41-17 score. But before I get off the line again, I do want to make sure I do pass on my condolences yet again to the Shepik family, as well as the Ebling family and all the families affected by the unfortunate passing of Jill Shepik. Rest in peace, Jill. Prayers to you and the entire family on behalf of your South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network family, as well as the South Florida Tribune. So, meanwhile, once again, on behalf of Steve Balestrieri, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you next week.